Kevin, one of the reasons I've picked the Vikings is the most improved team in the league, and I said, listen, this is nothing against Mike Tomlin, Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, Mike Zimmer. These are really good coaches.
Yep.
But there is something about offensive coaches and the sensibility and the fragility of quarterbacks. They make a lot of money, and they get a lot of criticism. And I said, I don't know if Kirk ever had a guy that he could kind of feel like he could complain, and it's okay to complain. You've quarterbacked. You know this, kind of the ups and downs of it. I mean, you have a bad Sunday, it lives with you. It is hard to get that out of your system. And I've said I think he needed an offensive coach. It's no criticism to anybody in this league. Russell Wilson and Pete struggled at the end. Belichick and Brady struggled. There is something. So when you have your relationship with Kirk, when you sat down the first time, what did you guys address? How did you connect with him?
Well, that's the word you just said at the very end. It's about connecting. I think offensive football in our league, I think it always has, but maybe more so than ever, runs through the quarterback position and runs through the comfort of the quarterback position, not the play caller. You can have a bunch of stuff drawn up on the board that looks really great and try to put it in a game plan. But I think the quarterback ownership of not only the week in and week out plan, but the comfort of being able to be themselves, how they lead, because I do think it's not a prerequisite to being successful at this position in this league. But I think just like as a head coach, just like what I try to do every single day, I think if your quarterback, is authentically being himself and he's as talented as Kirk is and gains the respect of his teammates because they see how he works, they see how he prepares, they see all he wants to do deep down inside is win football games. I think my role as a coach and really as the offensive play caller and coaches just really try to connect with him so much that he's an extension of me and I can be an extension of him and I can learn kind of what makes him tick. And then ultimately what we do on Sundays is going to be about what he's comfortable with. I think those meetings, Colin, those one-offs, those Friday afternoons, those Saturday mornings, game plan set. I may have my likes, I may have my favorites of the week, but you know what, Colin, if they don't show up on his list and when we talk things out, guess what plays aren't going to get called? They're going to be when in doubt. And by no means do we ask him to call the game or try to, put everything together for us, but we lay out the plan, we give him repetition, we give him the intent, and then it's about, finding that balance between what we think is the best way to attack an opponent, but also what we think is the best way to get him in a rhythm, keep him from getting hit, and then ultimately allow himself to feel great throughout that game, the ebbs and flows. Because what you said is right. It's the hardest position in sports, both during a game, after a game, highs and lows of a season. We're just trying to create an environment for Kirk where he can be himself on a daily basis. He can lead our group and then ultimately prepare in a way that when his best is required on Sundays, he'll be there for us time and time again. And you know what? I know how hard it is if he's not, or he hits that adversity that every NFL quarterback, no matter who you are, you hit throughout a season. I'm going to be the first guy standing there to let him know, hey, we're going to figure this out together. We're going to work through it. And I'm going to be right there with you every step of the way. And I do think that offensive, defensive coaching, I just think that's my philosophy for our whole team, but I think it magnifies itself for our quarterback.
I'm going to give you the name of a quarterback who you've played on the same team with or coached. And let's pretend I've never seen him play. Yep. And in a sentence, you have to describe what makes him special. I've never seen him play. Tom Brady, you were drafted by the Patriots. Tom Brady.
Elite competitor with an unbelievable way of playing this game at an incredibly high level when circumstances are not always in his favor.
Matt Stafford.
Incredible talent that to go along with a makeup that makes everybody around him better.
You were with the Niners in 2016, so that's 6 years ago. That wasn't Alex Smith. Was it Kaepernick?
Well, Colin was there. We had Colin, we had Blaine, and we had Christian Ponder. I did coach Alex in Washington.
Okay, let's go. Alex Smith. Underrated.
Underrated for sure. Has the traits and qualities to do what I just talked about with Matthew, as far as make everybody around him better. But just unbelievably consistent, authentic, and successful.
Kirk Cousins.
Extremely talented, tough, durable, and a guy that I think is on his way to reaching his potential.
When the Niners signed Jimmy Garoppolo to a contract, he disappeared for several weeks, if not several months. This was news to me. Did the Niners, because I always thought Jimmy was kind of a team guy, but did they have buyer's remorse after they couldn't get a hold of him for 6 weeks?
Well, you and I both have kids who are, running with the cool crowd. So I think the term is ghosted. He ghosted them. I'm gonna have to check with my kids to make sure I'm saying that right. But yeah, Colin. So let's go back to 2017. They make the trade for Jimmy at the deadline, which surprised a lot of people, and they hadn't done a lot of thought beforehand. And Belichick called Kyle. They did the deal for a 2, and then he came in and won those last 5 games after they were already eliminated, and they were calling him Jimmy Jesus and chanting MVP at Levi's. And so they paid him, and he was, for a minute, the highest paid player in football. And I covered that press conference for NFL Network. We carried it live. It was a ray of sunshine for a franchise that had a rough few years, with the Harbaugh firing and then Tomsula and Chip Kelly, and they were all fired up. And then, yeah, the way it was told to me by several members of that coaching staff, then he just kind of stopped communicating for weeks and weeks. And that is not normal behavior for a franchise quarterback, let alone one that you just, made the highest paid guy in football. So that kind of caught them off guard. So I don't want to say Jimmy's not a team guy. He's very, very well liked in that locker room. He's a very likable guy. He's a tough player, and he, played through injuries last year and almost got them to a Super Bowl. But it definitely frustrated his bosses, and it happened again that next offseason after, he had suffered the knee injury that wiped out most of 2018. It happened again after 2019 when he had a 10-point lead midway through the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. And the only time that it didn't happen was 2020 when they drafted Trey Lance after making the trade. Then Jimmy, I kept hearing what a great offseason he was having. That was code for he's here and he's engaged. And he did have a really impressive season last year, given the injuries he fought through. But then somewhat predictably, after last season ended with the NFC Championship game defeat, he not only stopped communicating, but he went and got his shoulder taken care of on his throwing arm, which they were not in the loop about that decision. And then their efforts to trade him were short-circuited largely because of that. Not that he didn't need the surgery, but just the frustration returned. But at this point, they had already kind of psychically moved on to Trey Lance anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I can see people listening to this and saying, so what? You get it. It's like, no, you're not a franchise quarterback, right? You have a regular job. Like franchise quarterback, you'd prefer not being ghosted for 7 to 8 to 9 weeks. I mean, that's
and these are voluntary activities, but the job of quarterback is considered very different in the NFL, and that's one reason why they're paid what they're paid. And we saw with Kyler Murray, right? There was the infamous clause in his contract that seemed to indicate that his employers don't believe he can be counted on for sure to do outside studying. And you and I talked about that. We talked about Ben Roethlisberger and how he wasn't a big studier earlier in his career. So it could be a very sensitive issue. These guys can care deeply. They can prepare intensely. They can be very tough, but there are different degrees of obsession. And, Peyton Manning, probably tried to use every free second he could to figure out a way to get an edge. Aaron Rodgers this offseason had all these new receivers So there was a very valid reason for him to want to get with them timing wise and start establishing that connection. And he chose to, by his own account, trip. And I'm joking around. I went to Cal. I'm not judging. But Aaron Rodgers decided not to spend a bunch of time doing that in the offseason, and he may be good enough to get away with that. Tom Brady, hit a point in New England where he wanted to be in LA in the offseason and he wasn't around much. So you can overcome it, but usually the stories of it being overcome usually have to do with guys who are first ballot Hall of Fame level talents and not guys like Jimmy who are in that, that next tier or the one below.